Last Tuesday, we lost an American hero, Dr. Dorothy Height, who passed at the age of 98. This extraordinary woman who was equally at home with the least of us and the greatest, befriended and respected by White House residents, from First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt to President Barack Obama and all the presidents in between. Born in an era of intense racial discrimination, she refused to be bound by the cords of that injustice. She was committed to tearing down the barriers of race and gender discrimination. Here with me today to talk about Ms. Height's legacy is Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton of the District of Columbia, Texas Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson, the Executive Director of the National Black Caucus of State Legislators, Lakimba Desadier, and the Executive Director and CEO of the National Coalition of Black Civic Participation, Melody Campbell. Ladies, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I was talking to Susan Taylor a few weeks ago. Dr. Dorothy Height was fighting in the hospital, and doctors were surprised that she was still hanging in there. And Susan said it was amazing. Just 2 weeks ago, she was at her desk, called me and said, "I need you to come to D.C. now." And she said, whenever Dr. Height called, I don't care what you were doing, you got up and left to go see what she wanted.
And if the truth be told, when she was told she had to go into the hospital, she resisted and said, "I'm sorry, I've got a speaking engagement." They had to virtually force her into the hospital. They could see she was weak and needed to go, and she stayed there a long time, fighting to the end. She gave new meaning to the word activist. Spell it the way Dorothy did.
Indeed.
What about that in terms of, because Donna Brazil told me that the doctors even amazed that they said, man, they said this woman is absolutely resilient. And even and the same driver we use, Mr. Cowles, he said, man, she said she's in the hospital pulling cords out. She said, because I have work to do. So even to the end, she made it clear, I have work to do. Melody?
Oh, most definitely. And she always taught us never give up. One of the last groups that she spoke to before she went to the hospital was with Master Series Barbara Skinner's group, Dr. Barbara Skinner, William Skinner's group, and it was a group of young people. And she said that, no, I have to speak. And she wasn't feeling good. And she said, no, I want to speak. And her message was never give up. And so even through the end, in those weeks, she didn't give up, and that's the lesson. Whatever you do it to the end.
Look, the last number of years, she would be around in a wheelchair, and I swear, she was everywhere.
That's right.
There wasn't an event that I went to around the country that you did not see this woman in a wheelchair with the hat on.
Absolutely.
First one to get there, last one to leave.
She was a trailblazer. I mean, she's teaching us, as our generation, that there's no excuses to be what we need to be. We should not accept anything less, and we should always promote. So she gave us an example. She led by example all the time.
Congresswoman?
Well, I've known her so many years and helped to organize the National Council of Negro Women in Dallas. And what impressed me about her is how she could smoothly move from one group to another. I remember in 1984, she was at the Democratic National Convention in California. And I got back home, and the Republican National Convention was in Dallas. And she called me to say that she was there. And so I said, well, I must do something while you're here. So I had a party at my house for her, and she came and brought some black Republicans. So I said, you get along with everybody, don't you?
Well, that's an important point.
Yeah.
That here was a woman who spent her life fighting for civil rights and women's rights. Mostly associated with black people, but equally respected by Republicans and Democrats. As a Republican president gave her one of the highest honors, a Democratic president gave her one of the highest honors. But I got to say something to you about her holding on, because you mentioned that, Roland. I was one of the women that gathered when she went into the hospital. Mm-hmm. That was at least 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, because I got the phone call and they said...
I got the phone call from Alexis Herman. We think, you know, this is it. We gathered. We said, we'll just stay here until the end. She didn't have any relatives. Some of them were coming from New York. Well, we would have still been sitting there. That's right. We finally had to give up and go home because she wasn't giving up. She wasn't ready to leave this earth.
Right, absolutely.
She had work to do.
We know about, she's also talked about when she was rejected by Bernard College because they had met their quota. She actually did an interview with Armstrong Williams. We have several different bites of that. So I want to play that and then talk about how that really set up her whole lifelong commitment to activism.
I graduated with honors from my high school, and I was accepted at Barnard College. for admission. And when I reported for admission, they discovered that I was a Negro. And Dean Gildersleeve just said to me, she said, well, you're young enough and you can come back next year because we have 2 Negro students, Vera Joseph and Belle Tobias, and we cannot take a third. Well, I think that I will never be able to get over the traumatic feeling that there was. You know, when you just finished high school and had all these recommendations and had the grades. The good thing was that I eventually went down to New York University and got there just as they were closing registration. And my sister accompanied me because I had an older sister with whom I was living in New York. And the dean asked me for my diploma. I didn't have one, my application. My sister suggested that I show her my letter from Barnard College, and I did. And the dean looked at it and she said, a girl with these kind of grades won't need an application.
She talked about that traumatic experience. Do you think that plays a role in what drove her, the rejection that other African Americans, especially women, faced all across this country, whether it was jobs, employment, education?
I think it was in her DNA, because before that, she was already in the streets protesting lynching. This is a woman who came from a part of the country where, and that's why they didn't know at Barnard, a virtually all-white high school, but who felt her blackness when most people didn't, and who was willing to march out front with it. So by the time she was rejected at Barnard, she was ready for them. You notice what she did. Instead of going back dejected or even applying to one of our HBCUs, she went down the street to New York University. Never give up. You'll find somebody who will accept you. That's the lesson for us all.
That's an example of her quote. If the time is not ripening, you ripen the time. That's what she did. She took advantage of that. She decided to move on and find something else to continue her legacy, which she has done.
Going to a break. When we come back, I want to pick up on this, but also on how it took a woman to have to keep all these massive egos together at the March in Washington for Jobs and Freedom. And so what that had to be like in this male-dominated civil rights hierarchy, being frankly the only woman or one of the only women at the top. So we'll pick up on that when we come back.